Hey guys, it's Vandiazzle back again for another Cardfight Vanguard deck profile. So if you guys enjoy, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and donate to the Patreon. And let's get this one started. Today, we have Keter Sanctuary's Hexaorb for set 3. Now, Hexaorb, despite being in the first set, like, along with Eugene being like the budget decks where you play them if you don't have the money to buy the other ones, and they weren't the most entertaining in my opinion in set 1, in set 2, they got a good amount of support. Both of them got side shafted by PBD and Overlord, of course, but they still got a good amount of support. And then in set 3, they literally took all of the support and got the most out of it. So in my opinion, I think Hexaorb and Eugene are about to get really good really quickly, especially depending on what they give us in set 4. But anyways, this deck is really fun in set 3. I like it's gotten more deck stacking abilities, and all around it just feels a lot more consistent. So let's go ahead and get this deck started, because it was my least favorite out of everyone, and in terms of artwork it still is, but in terms of deck play wise, it is one of my favorites now. So first up, our starter is Connect Sorceress, 6k base, 5k shield, grade 0 with boost. Auto when it's rolled upon if you win second, draw a card. Nothing too special about it, just the standard starter skill. You draw if you win second. I know this came out at the beginning of Overdress, so I have no right to be mad at it when Bushy wouldn't even know about the whole come on, give us unique starter type of things, but I'm still mad about that. But it's still unique, you know, it has its own little, kind of gives you off the Magus feel, actually. I don't remember what Magus this reminds me of. I think it's a Rhombus. I mean, in terms of shape-wise, it reminds me of a Rhombus, unless there's a triangle Magus, but I don't remember what Magus this reminds me of. But either way, the right line just looks like a bunch of Maguses, and all around the deck's really interesting. So, Connect Sorceress may not have an addition. It doesn't have a unique ability, but it has the flair that the deck needs for looks. Onto our trigger lineup, we run one copy of our over trigger of Light Dragon Deity of Honors Amartinoa. I'm going to keep saying that wrong. There will never be a day that I will call that right. I'm just going to call ARM. 5k base, 50k shield, grade 0 with boost. Over trigger, you may only have up to one over trigger in your deck. When revealed as a trigger, remove that card, draw a card, choose one of your units, and it gets plus 1 million for the turn. If revealed during your drive check, activates additional effect, which is until end of turn, you may perform drive checks for your battles with rear guards. Okay, this does a lot in Bastion, because that's just 6 drive checks. If you saw the game from yesterday, it was also 6 drive checks, except 4 of them were just straight up grade 3s in a row. Somehow. But, this, in my opinion, is my least favorite, solely because it doesn't have like a flashy effect. Like, I have died several times to Infinitude. Bless Favor is a fucking everything bagel. The Dragon Empire over trigger, while only standing a unit, all of the Dragon Empire units have really good Vanguard abilities, so not the best thing to fight against. And then Dark States last for the entire game, and so does Lyrical. So then when it leaves you with this one where it only gives you rearguard drive checks for the turn, it just feels so bad in comparison, because like Draveda and this thing, they're the least flashy ones. Draveda feels like it has like an overall lasting effect, even, you know, in my opinion, it has an overall lasting effect, or at least it feels that way. This one doesn't. I like it. I'm not saying it's bad. It really is good, but in my opinion, it's like the least useful one. There are arguments we can have for each of these, but anyways, it's nice. You still get that draw, you get the 1 million standard over trigger ability, but then you also get your rearguard attacks, and in this deck it still is valuable because your Vanguard ability activates when you just drive check triggers. It doesn't matter if it's for her attack or not. So you can kind of just abuse the shit out of this with Hexaorb, and I like this card. Unfortunately, we can only run one over trigger unless they just decide to bop these down to 10k, but even then, I'd still feel like this is a bit too good for that. Either way, I like this one of. On to our other triggers, we run 7 fronts in total. 3 copies of White Crow Sorcerer Taxus, a 5k base, 15k shield, grade 0 vanilla. Bard of Heavily Song Alpacc, 4k base, 15k shield, grade 0 with boost. Front trigger, continuous guard circle. If your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, gets plus 5k shield. So it's a 20k guard if your opponent's grade 3, if your opponent's on grade 3. So basically the second that most people start playing the game for reals is when this actually becomes useful, which is really nice. And then we have our crit trigger and Blade Feather Dragon, 4k base, 15k shield as well. Critical trigger though, auto rear at the end of the battle that it boosted, shove it to soul, choose one of your units, and it gets plus 2 for the turn. Your 2 main deck stacking materials is fronts and crits. We run less crits because front triggers do so much in this deck. Like, quite literally, I have made it so that my attacks are literally unguardable unless you've either been stacking your hand for the moment where I drive check triple front, which is always on accident. Yes, I always purposely stack at least one of those at the top of my deck, but then the other 2 just show up out of fucking nowhere. And they either my opponent has a bunch of PGs that they're ready to guard this, or they have been stacking triggers in their hand, because otherwise you're taking these, which is the really fun part about this deck, because it gets really big really quickly. And then the crit is here for crit pressure, obviously. I for some reason, I always instinctively discard the crit from my guard fodder, which I always regret because then there's always 2 fronts at the top, and the crit in the 2 fronts would always be really helpful, but I always forget to stack the crit on top out of just pure instinct, which fucking sucks. But 4 copies of the crit because you do need it, and then 7 fronts to overwhelm them with power. And then our heal is Circuling Sorceress, just this heal. I don't know why it feels more appropriate for like the Oracle Think Tank type of feel. Even though this is the heal I drive check damage / drive check the least out of all the Keter heals, which is only 2 of them, but still. Actually, this is the heal I drive check the least in general. At least every other heal I see often. This one I rarely see, or at least damage / drive check. It normally ends up in my hand. So then on to our grade 1s, we run 4 copies of Diaglass Sorceress, 8k base, 5k shield, grade 1 with boost. Auto, when this unit's placed on rear from hand. If your Vanguard is a Hexaorb Sorceress or a Pentagleam Sorceress, counterblast 1, discard 1, look at top 2, choose up to 2 unit cards from among them, call them to rear guard, and put the rest on the top of your deck in any order. So basically, counterblast 1, discard 1 if you're on the grade 2 or grade 3 of the ride line. You either call the top 2, or leave them on top, or you can call any number of them and then put the rest on top. So, very interesting grade 1. How I choose to use this is probably different from everyone else how they choose to use this. What I do is I purposefully will use this on the turn that I've deck stacked beforehand. Like I maybe use the new grade 2, or I'll use one of the grade 2s to deck stack, or maybe I'll use the skill of Pentagleam to deck stack, and then I'll call Diaglass, and I'll try to make sure both the top 2 cards are normal units. Counterblast 1, discard a card, just call the top 2, so I've effectively deck thinned, and I get 2 free units out of it. That's how I choose to do this, because it advances my board. But in the cases where I just see 2 triggers at the top, or even just 1 trigger, unless I actually look to top 3, I'm not using its ability because I don't want to waste a counterblast and discard just to call 1 unit. So 4 copies of Diaglass because she's really useful in spamming out a field, and she still stacks your deck for it. And she can also be used in a grade 1 and a grade 2 rush because she can also go off when you're at the grade 2. Next up we have our PG and Aegismare Dragon, 6k base, grade 1 boost, 0 shield. Continuous Sentinel. What the fuck is a Sentinel? I don't know what I was about to say. Continuous Sentinel. You may only have up to 4 copies, only 4 Sentinels in the deck. Auto, when this unit's put on guard circle, choose one of your units and it cannot be hit into battle. If your hand has 2 or more cards, choose a card from hand and discard it. So basically that means when you play this, if it's only this and another card in your hand, you don't have to discard. If you have this and 2 other cards, you got to discard 1. Now, in my opinion, this is the deck where the PG activates the least, because how I play this, I end up with a lot of hand cards throughout the entire game, and the only way you're getting rid of those is if you're playing some big-ass power deck or some aggressive deck with really decent numbers. Like Nirvana, and sometimes Nirvana will make me go down to low hand cards. Orphis, I will most likely go down to low hand cards against unless I'm just slowly stacking my PGs. What is the other deck? Magnolia. Magnolia is a bitch to deal with when Magnolia gets its things done. Prison's like the 50-50 line, I guess. And sometimes if I brick, Prison's the problem, but if it's not, then it's fine. So around this PG comes in useful somehow. When, in my opinion, this is the deck that it should happen the least in for that ability to go off, but somehow it happens. It does happen the least often, but it happens more often than I thought it would. So take that as you will. 4 copies though, because you want a PG, even if a deck that has a bunch of hand cards. Next up, we have our last grade 1 in our grade 1 of the ride line. 1 copy and only going to the ride deck of Tier Square Sorceress, 8k base, 5k shield, grade 1 with boost. Auto when it's run up by Pentagleam, counterblast 1, draw a card. That is straight up stolen from Circle Magus, where it was just counterblast 1, draw a card. Unfortunately, it's restricted by Pentagleam. Why did they restrict that to Pentagleam? There is a card in V that does the exact same thing for the exact same cost, and the only difference is it does not have to ride upon a specific card. You can just ride upon it in general, even with the grade 1 if you fucking wanted to. And then the other skill, which you're never going to pull off unless they give us a card that can just call stuff straight from drop for Keter. Auto rear once per turn. When you dread check as a trigger unit, counterblast 1, choose an opponent's rear guard, put it to bottom of their deck. In set 1, I ran this out of 4 of. Not because I'm stupid. It's just because it bothered me not running all the ride line cards out of 4 especially with like the name restrictive stuff. So I chose to run it out of 4 of. Second set 2 came out. Nope, it went down to 1 of. And then I finally restricted Pentagleam down to 1 of 2. So Tier Square Sorceress, her rear guard ability is shit because she wastes your counterblast and she only gets rid of a former rear guard, which your opponent might intercept with anyways. So like, I don't like her for that, which is why she's at 1, and no one else uses her like that. I mean, everyone uses her at 1, I'm pretty sure, so take that as you will. On to grade 2s, we run 4 copies of Exquisite Knight Olwein, 10k base, 5k shield, grade 2 with intercept. The man who looks like he's in a desert or a rocky land with golden armor and probably represents Gold Paladin. He is one of my favorite cards, and he is my favorite card in this deck. Auto, when this unit is placed on rear, if your Vanguard is a Hexaorb Sorceress, Soul Blast 1, look at top 2, choose up to 2 cards from them, put them at the top, and put the rest on the bottom. So, unlike Diaglass, he has a Soul Blast instead of a Counter Blast and a discard, which is interesting. And instead of calling the top 2, he can stack them either at the bottom or the top or split them in between, which is what I like about him. So you can kind of stack your drive check still. In auto rear, when your drive check reveals a trigger unit, Counter Blast 1 and gets plus 10k for the turn. For me, I have seen something very interesting, or at least I've observed something interesting. Every game that I play, I always use him differently. When I say I use him differently, I don't mean like there are situations each turn where I won't use his skill, or and on another turn during that game I will use his skill. No, how I play with this guy is one game I will use his skill, and in one game I will not. When I say one game, I will not. I mean during the entirety, I would not use that second skill because for some reason I'm like, I don't want to waste my counter blast. Even if I have a bunch of counter charges at the ready, I don't know why I'm extremely paranoid in some games. So sometimes I'll go entire games without using that, and then sometimes I'll go games with only using that, and I will use it at every opportunity. I don't know why I do that. It's just something I do. But anyways, that's really good, especially when a Hexaorb gives you another 10k from your drive check skill, so you can just stack power on this boy, make him extremely big, especially on those turns where I drive check triple fronts. Oh god, he is very annoying to deal with because he hits like... Was it that game that I hit the 80s? I'm trying to remember what I hit with him because I used his skill twice. So he hit 30 plus triple front 60. Persona I made it 70. I know I gave one of Hexaorbs 10 to it, so 80 plus a boost. It hit 88. So yeah, that really nice. Maybe it hit 90. And I'm just forgetting one of the boosters, but Owen's really nice with that. He gets you the deck stack. He gets you even more power just by counterblasting, and you do have a decent amount of counter charges in here, so it bounces it out. All around, one of my favorite grade 2s, 4 of. 4 of Aspiring Magic Cacarone, our only other grade 2 in the main deck, followed by our last grade 2, 10k base, 5k shield, grade 2 with intercept. Arguably, this is better than him, in my opinion, also because I may be slightly biased because he's obviously a gold card, or at least a paladin card in general. He is more useful than her. That is bias speaking, by the way, I want to let that be clear. But in terms of ability, I'd say it goes either one. This is the more defensive card. This is the more aggressive card. It really just depends on how you want to go with it. That is an actual opinion, by the way. So, anyways, her skill is auto when it's placed on rear. If your Vanguard is Hexaorb or Pentagleam, so just like Diaglass, it can be used in a grade 2, which is really, really nice. Unlike Olwein over here, it can only be used at your grade 3. Soul Blast 1, look at top 2, put on the top of the deck in any order. So, unfortunately, you do not deck stack. You deck stack in the sense where you can guess what the next 2 cards are going to be. But you don't get to like send them to bottom or call them or place them somewhere else. They're going back to top regardless, which is very unfortunate. But it's still fine. You're still getting to look at the top 2, prepare for your drive check, maybe trying to manipulate it with some draw effects. And it's only a Soul Blast. Granted, Olwein and this actually compete for Soul Blast, especially with Hexaorb having a Soul Blast for its cost 2. But you also have the same amount of soul charges, you have the same amount of counter charges, so it's fine, it evens out. And her other skill is Continuous Rear and Guard Circle. If your Vanguard is Hexaorb Sorceress, it gets plus 2k and 5k shield active on both players' turns. So it's a 12k base and a 10k shield. I don't know why they just made it 2k. This hits literally nothing at 12k base unless you're playing premium against a Protect deck. But even then, it's still questionable. Why they made this a 12k base? Why not just give it another 3k? What was the point of this? I want to know why Bushy decided to cheap out and not give it the extra 1k, because I feel like that 1k matters. But either way, it's a nice grade 2, gives you more guarding power, gives you interesting hitting numbers, I guess. I'm not so sure about that one. And it still has a deck stacking ability. Not my favorite in deck stacking abilities, but it still has a deck stacking ability, and I love its background. 4 of. And then our last grade 2 in general in the grade 2 in the ride deck is Pentagleam Sorceress, 10k base, 5k shield, grade 2 with intercept. Auto when it's rode upon by Hexaorb. Look at top 3, put them at the top of the deck in any order. So just like this one, you do not get to put them anywhere else but the top, but you get to look at one more card and you do it for free. So it may be only when rode upon, but it's still good. And the other skill, the one that you would never use unless they give us an ability to call from drop. Auto, when it's placed on rear, look at the top card, put it at top or bottom, and if you put it on the bottom of your deck, it gets plus 2 for the turn. So basically a way to stack the next card in your deck if you know it's not going to be a trigger, or like you purposely stacked it so it's not a trigger, so you can call and still get a plus 2. You could. I only run it at 1 of, and that's only in the ride deck because you do not want that ability. It's not that useful. Like, I used it in the set too just for a free way of deck stacking. Now when you have this, you don't have any real reason to run this in the main deck, so 1 copy in the red deck. It's still good because you get that top 3 stack, but after that you would never use it again. Grade 3s. We run somewhat similar numbers to Bastion grade 3s. 2 copies of Divine Sister Lepisto, 13k base, grade 3 Twin Jet Persona Ride. Auto rear, when your draw checker has a trigger unit. Counterblast 2, standing, it gets +5 for the turn. I don't know why, but when I bring this thing out, this normally spells the end for my opponent, because every turn I've brought this out, it will always be the turn after I kill them, because this thing wipes out their hand so quickly. I never understand why. Just like Counterblast 2, I use up my remaining Counterblast, or like most of my remaining Counterblast. She stands, and I've somehow pulled enough triggers to make her a big swing, and even when they guard it, this severely cripples them. I don't know why this 4th attack always makes the difference, but it does. So Lepisto, 2 of, because she's always been the bane of my existence to all my opponents. Either way, that stand ability is actually really good, though. It does cost Counterblast 2, but if you play it right, she is very deadly. 3 copies of one of our counter charges, actually. Octadevote Sorceress, 13k base, grade 3 Twin Jet Persona Ride. Auto rear, when your draft checker has a trigger unit, if your Vanguard is Hexaorb Sorceress, retire it, counter charge 1, or soul charge 1. I hate that because it's like the heal triggers back in Premium, where you could bind it and another heal trigger from your drop when you use as a cost for G guarding, and it's either you counter charge 1 or soul charge 1, meaning you can't get both. I understand why, because then the resource game would be way too good and may break the deck. I wouldn't break it, but it would make it way too consistent in my opinion. So, that counter charge or soul charge, as much as I hate it, I understand why. It makes the decks more fair, I guess? More fair is the word. I think more fair is the phrase I'm looking for. Either way, it's one of our counter charges. It's really easy to get off. Quite literally, I will always leave a circle open in the back row just to openly call this, because I will never call it to the front row unless I'm trying to kill them that turn and I have no other attackers. And even then, I'd probably rather call a trigger than call this. So, 3 copies of Sorceress. She is good when you pull triggers because she can get your resources back. 4 copies of Knight of War Damage Fosado, 13k base, grade 3 Twin Jet Persona Ride. Continuous rear, this unit cannot be chosen by your opponent's card effects. And auto rear, when this unit attack hits, counter charge 1 and soul charge 1. So, pretty much, the only way to murder this thing is just to swing into it, or unless you're killing a board at once without targeting. And auto rear, you know, the on-hit ability, so you add on-hit pressure, especially because your deck wants resources, making them guard 2 attacks, 1 your Vanguard, 1 your Fosado, and if you pull crits while they're at 4 damage with their double front power, because of Hexaorb Persona Ride triple drive thing, numbers get scary, and then your all front row is blocked attackers. And that counter charge 1 and soul charge 1 is really helpful, because, you know, if it does end up hitting, you get both instead of 1 like this one. But if you have both of them on the field, it's really nice to have both of them. I say get the counter charge unless you've been really protective of your counter blast, and go for the soul charge, because you might need them more, because these 2 both cost soul blast. So yeah, but in my opinion, I think counter blast is more important in this deck. So Fosado, 4 of, adds the on hit pressure, and when it does hit, it gets you that counter charge and soul charge. And then our last normal unit in our main grade 3, and just our thing that will be on Vanguard in general, Hexaorb Sorceress, 3 in the main deck, 1 in the ride deck, 13k base, grade 3 Twin Jet Persona Ride. Auto Van, when your draft checker has a trigger unit, choose one of your rear guards and it gets +10 for the turn. And Act Van, once per turn, if you Persona roll this turn, counterblast 1 and soul blast 1, reveal up to 1 critical trigger or front trigger from your hand, put it at the top of the deck, and it gets +1 drive for the turn. So, guaranteedly, if you draft check a trigger, one of your rear guards gets +10, and with how rules work, if you boost this with an 8k base and it hits 21 and your opponent guards for 33, if you see 1 trigger, you can give the first trigger to the Vanguard, and then, the power of the actual trigger, and then use Hexaorb's ability, give its power to the booster, and according to rulings, that will hit 41 and be able to break through the shield. I hate this thing so much, because whenever someone calls a booster on it, it forces me to PG it, because I know their numbers can hit like in the 60s if they give both to Van, which fucking is annoying as hell. But even then, it still powers up the rear guards exponentially too, because you can just give it to the front row rear guards to make them hit for bigger. Honestly, this deck is really scary if you go like the crit route, where you add more crits than fronts, but in my opinion, I think the deck needs more numbers and it needs crits. But if you want to go the crit route, go the crit route. It's a lot scarier. Next up, it's also other skill, is the Vanguard Persona Ride skill, which is really useful, because you get the ability to stack a trigger at the top of the deck, and you don't have to stack a trigger to get the drive. You get the drive regardless, but if you want, you can stack a crit or a front, and then you have triple drive with a crit or a front at the top. So, either way, this thing's really scary. The only downside to that is that you have to Persona Ride for it, and there is a Persona Ride Searcher. I choose not to run her because I quite literally have no space for her. I test played so much, but the deck felt so wonky when I put her in there. I mean, I could get rid of Lepisto for her, but Lepisto has saved me more times than ever and has killed many of my enemies, so I refuse to get rid of Lepisto for that, and that's just how it rolls. If you really want to run that grade 1, you can, but in my opinion, I don't like that grade 1. It just doesn't, I'm not saying it's not good, but I do not have any space for it, and the only card I would cut for is something that has saved me so many times, and I feel like I owe it my life for that, so I would refuse to run that grade 1. Unless Bushy ups the deck number to like 3 more cards, and I might run it at 3 of, but still. So I like this grade 3, I like Hexaorb in general, 3 of in the main deck, 1 of in the right deck. And our last card in general is our normal order Wish to Tomorrow. I finally got rid of Hopeful Testudo, because that 15k shield was not helpful, especially against a deck that murders rearguards. This helps out a lot more because it's better in the sense that it's like Hexaorb guaranteed. So Wish for Tomorrow is play this by counterblasting 1 and soul blasting 1 and revealing a critical or front from your hand. If your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you draw a card and put the reveal card at the top. So basically, swap a card in your hand, swap a trigger in your hand with the card on the top of your deck, and it's a counterblast 1 and a soul blast 1, and you can do it when your opponent's at grade 3. So basically, same thing as Hexaorb, same cost, same ability, you're just not getting a drive out of it, but it activates regardless if you Persona Ride or not, and they just have to be at grade 3 for it. All around, I love this order, it's really helpful, 2 of. And that was the deck, so I hope you guys enjoyed. Honestly, this deck, despite being a really good budget deck, I guess it was a good budget deck back in set 1. It got better in set 2. In set 3, they got a lot of support. I really can't wait to see how they go with it. It's turned from one of my least favorite decks to one of my more favorite decks. I'm not going to say it's in the top 5, but I'm going to say it's like in the top 10 now, even though that's not really much to go off of because I think there's 15 builds per deck, but it's still better than nothing. So all around, I like this deck. It's really fun. You get to stack the top cards of your deck. You get to see triggers. Triggers become just 20k boosters if you send them onto rears, and all around, it's just very entertaining to play with and very annoying to guard against. I should know because I've played against this deck multiple times. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, join the Discord, follow the Twitch, donate to the Patreon, and I'll see you all in the next one. Don't forget to stand up your Vanguards.